Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
Once I started going, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to finish it. And just being able to look back now, it was very physically demanding. Just looking back and being like, wow, I did that. I can overcome hard things. I can set a goal. I can achieve those goals if I put my mind to it and do a little bit of preparation.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Say the word, Chef.
Let it rip.
All right, folks, episode 112 of the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. From time to time, we have episodes about racers who adventure. They go and they do something not connected to a race, but to a big task, a big undertaking. And today we have Joel and Kim on the show to talk about their Northern Forest Canoe Trail adventure, which took place several years ago, believe it or not. We had recorded it and I held it in the vault and I wanted to release it during the winter because this is great training fuel. So Joel and Kim come on the show. They talk about their preparation, their training. They've done some big stuff and their adventures and what they want to do. Since we've recorded this, they've actually become married. So congratulations to Joel and Kim. Delighted to hear about your wedding and so glad you're doing so well. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of The Dark Zone. And as you remember, folks, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Imagine a world where young women in Afghanistan and Pakistan rise above societal constraints, embracing their strength and potential. Ascend Athletics is making this vision a reality. Through mountaineering-based leadership training, Ascend empowers girls and women aged 15 to 24 to become courageous leaders in their communities. By conquering physical summits, these young women build self-esteem and develop skills that last a lifetime. Operating since 2015 in Afghanistan, expanding to Pakistan in 2023, Ascend focuses on regions where gender inequality is most pronounced, providing tools for girls and women to lead empowered lives. Join the Dark Zone in supporting these brave young women as they climb towards a brighter future. Visit ascendathletics.org to learn more about and contribute to this transformative mission. And remember, Ascend pays nothing for the spot. We love the work that they do, and the Dark Zone is happy to support it.
Calling all adventure racers. The time has come to sign up for the Cerberus 3-day expedition stage race happening May 2nd through 4th, 2025 in the breathtaking Southwest Virginia mountains. This isn't just any race. It's 3 consecutive days, each packed with 10 to 12 hours of trekking, biking, and paddling. Whether you're a seasoned racer or a newcomer eager to dive in, Cerberus offers the perfect blend of challenge and camaraderie. Sanctioned by USARA and part of the AR World Series, your participation earns you points in both rankings. Plus, we got you covered with detailed topo maps, breakfast each morning around 5 a.m., dinner each evening when you finish around 7 p.m., and race-branded gear for those who register before March 1st, 2025. Enjoy free on-site camping or opt for a cozy cabin or nearby accommodations. And don't worry about the boats. We provide standard 2-seat canoes for each team. So assemble your team of 2 to 4 members and get ready for an unforgettable experience. Visit thecerberusrace.com to register and find all the details.
Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. In most of our episodes, we talk with adventure racers about adventure racing. From time to time, we like to bring on racers who adventure. And so for today's episode, we've brought on Joel Ford and Kim Pearson. They are a couple. They recently tackled the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. There's a deep bench of adventure racing experience that we have between the two of them, and we've invited them on the Dark Zone to talk a bit about that experience. So Joel and Kim, thanks for joining us on the Dark Zone. Let's jump right into the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. Tell us a bit about that experience. Where was it? When did you do it? How long it was? What was that adventure like for you?
Yeah, the Northern Forest Canoe Trail runs in the northeast corner of the United States of America from the state of New York through Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, totaling about 740 miles. I think our mileage was a little bit lower, but over 700 miles. Through a series of lakes and rivers and lots of portages, some upstream paddling, some downstream paddling. It's an old North American trading route and Native American route, pretty historical. Thoreau was on part of it back in his day. And So we had this idea to do the trip, and finally had the time and set off to do it. And this was last summer. I believe it was May 2022 when we launched.
Now, you did the entire canoe trail. What was your start time and what was your end time? How many days did it take you?
It took us about 42 days total.
How many 0 days did you have? Did you paddle every day for 42?
No, we didn't. We had a couple of 0 days. I would say maybe 5 or 6, maybe a little more.
I was going to say 4, but yeah, somewhere, not a ton.
Not a lot.
So that's a lot of work, right? So 42 days you're out there, 38 days you're working. And to your point you brought up, it's not like a simple paddle. There's portaging, there's some upstream paddling. Walk us through, before we get into the experience itself and everything you went through, what was your preparation like? And here's why I asked that question. Adventure racers, and you both very strong racers. Joel, you've been with Rootstock Racing, do a lot of big stuff with them. Adventure racers always kind of live at a pretty high level of being prepared, right? They don't need to get ready if they're already ready. What was your preparation like for the two of you to get ready for the Northern Forest Canoe Trail?
Well, when we first met and we first started dating, I was preparing to canoe down the entire Mississippi River with a team, trying to set the Guinness World Record for speed for the distance travel. And that's 2,200 miles. So I was doing a lot of paddling, and that consumed most of my weekend hours. And so when Kim and I started dating, our first date,
she had no choice. She had no choice. But she's going to hang out with you. She better put a paddle in her hand. All right.
Seemingly it was in the winter time when all this was happening. So we'd be out for 3 or 4 hours at a time with snow on the ground. And she was a great sport about it. So it almost felt like we had been preparing for this trip since the beginning, as far as the training went, the time in the canoe, the gear. Like, I had bought her a few things just kind of paddling related, but they were gifts within our relationship. Like, I got her a headlamp for her birthday, I think, and a few things like that ultimately went towards the trip, even though we hadn't officially started planning the trip yet. But
so all of a sudden, like, Kim's sitting around, she gets like a paddle. She has like a headlamp. She has like a map of the canoe trail. Like, there's no official announcement you're doing it, but all the pieces are starting to assemble around you. So Kim, let's come to you for a second. Joel's done big stuff, right? He's hiked the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Mississippi Speed Record, which we'll get into a little bit. He's done all these really big things, plus the adventure racing, all of that. From your own experience, how big of a leap was this into you for such an epic paddle?
So it was kind of terrifying for me because I had to rearrange some things in my life to be able to do the trip. One of them, I had to leave my job. So that was like a huge hurdle, like mental hurdle for me to overcome. Like, what is life going to be like after this? Like, am I going to be able to get a job, or where am I going to live? Because I was renting at the time. So for me, it was all of those things. Like, I want to do this, but how am I going to be able to get there to be able to do the trip?
Right. And that's like a challenge we all have, right? So bravo to you for taking that leap, right? Saying to yourself, here's a thing I want to do. Here's someone I want to do it with. It requires preparation, it requires all of those things. And you had to put several things in line. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to work? All of that in order to tackle this challenge, which, by the way, you had never done something this big before.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, okay. So, right. So Kim, #hero, that box has been checked, right? Because just to do such a courageous and brave thing, getting into it really says something. And clearly the two of you are sitting next to each other in the same room. So I'm assuming it went well. Now we'll see how it went out there. I'm curious. So Joel, what was it like for you with your level of experience and the preparation to planning to be working with Kim to getting ready for this?
It surprisingly wasn't that much different than my solo preparations. We had a pretty long time that we had been thinking about it, maybe 6 months of kind of decision making before we started. So we had time as far as acquiring the gear and the maps and researching and buying the food and getting out and practicing and learning all the ins and outs. There was kind of like you said before, it was a very physical endeavor. Everyone thinks about getting in a canoe and it's like, oh, downstream paddling, or I'm out on a nice calm lake. And I was very surprised by the just rugged physicality of the trail. It was, I think maybe it ended up being like 150 miles of portaging within the 700 miles, maybe another 150 miles were upstream paddling, which a lot of times meant you were just walking upstream in the shallow waters, pulling your boat behind, or you were lining the boat up some rapids and stuff. So it ended up being a pretty difficult challenge when we were out there. And so I think our preparations really did pay off in that regard, knowing what we were getting into day by day.
Well, and to your point, rough estimate off the top of my head, 150 plus 150 is 300. The canoe trail was 700 miles, right? Around 700 miles. So almost half of the canoe trail required you to either be out of your boat, right, walking and carrying it, or being out of your boat and walking alongside. You had to line through some rapids. And lining, I'm assuming, is when you tie a rope to the boat, leave the boat in the water, and you walk with it. So was that the experience you thought you were going to have going into it, or did it end up being more rigorous than you thought?
It ended up being more rigorous. I think the portages were definitely harder than I thought. Just a lot more walking than I thought that there was going to be. So yeah, it was definitely harder than I imagined.
What was your longest carry? What was your longest portage?
Our longest portage was probably 20 miles.
Yeah, so that's one set.
Time out. So you carried the boat 20 miles.
Well, we had a set of wheels. So
okay, but still, okay, thank you. Okay, so you had your portage wheels with you. Okay.
Yep. And so some of the portages we could wheel, some were a difficult wheel, and some were a legit carry. And we often did it in two passes. We had probably 170 pounds of between all our gear and the boat. The boat itself was like 95 pounds, a big plastic boat, who we borrowed from Brian Rice. Shout out Adventure Racer.
There you go, Brian Rice. By the way, one of the earliest guests on the Dark Zone. Thank you, Brian Rice, Story Machine. I have to get him back on to talk more about it. I have to get him back racing again. Rice, we know you're out there. Find your gear. We're waiting for you. Okay, so you borrowed his canoe, right? So he was there in spirit.
Yeah, so that one portage that she was talking about is a section of the river, which officially on the maps is down the Dead River, but it's called the Dead River for a reason, because it's only runnable about 10 days out of the year. And during those 10 days, it's a raging torrent. When it is so it's listed on the maps as a paddle, but I don't think anybody has ever paddled it as far as the NFCT goes. So it ends up just being a really long road walk. And even though you're on a paved road, 19 miles, pushing 160 pounds of gear is a long day, no matter how you do.
Yeah, no matter, I can see the PTSD coming back now. Kim's getting she's looking off into the distance, realizing how hard that was. What was your typical day like? What time were you usually up, and how long were you out on the trail?
I would say we usually got up around 8 o'clock. We would pack up everything, all of our sleeping bags and everything, and then go outside and eat some breakfast. And then we would just pack up our tent and all of our gear. We had these waterproof backpacking backpacks, which were super helpful, just so not everything got wet while we're in the canoe. So we would put everything in our backpacks and then head out. And then we would try to sort of set a destination for where we wanted to camp that evening. So we would paddle pretty much until we got to whatever our next campsite was.
Right, and then just rinse and repeat, right? Unpack everything, put it out, camp, eat, sleep. And how did you, in reflection, how much did you enjoy it being that simple? Like, did you have contact with the outside world? Were you running a tracker? Did you have access to your phones? Or did you just head off into the wilderness and come out 42 days later?
We had a GPS tracker, mostly because I wanted it. Joel felt pretty confident that he probably didn't need one, but for me being my first adventure, I was like, I think I just need that little bit of safety net. Like if something happens to him, I don't know how, I don't know where we are, right. So I could press a button and then someone can come and find us if something really happens. So,
which by the way, that was the best thing to do. Like that was actually the wise thing, to ignore him. Having a backup plan. Someone's clapping at their podcast player right now. So good call on your part. By in case he clonked his head, you had something you were able to do.
Yes. And we actually just borrowed that from one of Joel's friends.
Dave Ashley, Adventure Racer, shout out.
Thank you.
Dave Ashley, who, by the way, right now as we speak, is somewhere in Nepal, walking up some hill somewhere. So Dave Ashley, Seven Summit guy, also a former guest on the Dark Zone. Thank you very much. So that's two former guests you've mentioned. Very good, Joel. Keep it going. Let's go for the third. Right. So you borrowed Dave's InReach, right? So you had that handy.
Yeah. And then we both had, or actually, Joel didn't even bring his cell phone. I brought mine, but I didn't have any service, like cell phone service.
Yeah, you were out there.
Unless we were in a town, but I just kept it off and mostly just used it for picture, like the camera portion, so I could take pictures and contact my parents when we were in town. So
how many days in between over the 42 days? How many towns did you come across? How many resupplies did you have? Were you out there for like a week, 2 weeks at a time with no other people? Like, what was the solitude like? Were there other people out on the water with you? Did you see other towns, or did you really feel like it was remote? Because that's a pretty remote section of the country to pass through. It doesn't feel like because it's the Northeast, but you're pretty much out there.
Yeah, when we started out in New York State, it's fairly populated. You're going through like the Fulton chain of lakes is kind of a vacation area up there, and then pretty residential, in and out of some residential blocks, and so there's a lot of stuff going on around in the portages. You're going by houses and stuff, and then the further up you get there, you hit Maine and you get into the upstate Maine, and yeah, I don't know if there was days we didn't see anybody, but probably.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of
see plenty of wildlife and stuff. But to get back to the resupply, I think on average we were probably hitting a town every 4 days and resupplying, and then we would probably stay overnight in a hotel every other town, so maybe every 8 or 9 days. And our longest stretch was the Allagash Wilderness in upstate Maine. I think we carried food for 10 days. And so that's the very last section. So luckily you're kind of prepared for everything. You've been through the grinder at that point. You kind of know how to handle it and how to pack. On the flip side, I'd say the trail was a harder first half than second half. You're hitting a lot of those big rugged portages, and the upstream paddling is pretty much over when you get to the second half. So it's a trial by fire. You get out there and it's hard, but you get rewarded with the second half is more remote, more beautiful, more scenic, more isolated.
When you were coming through the earlier part of the system and go through the Fulton section, all that, was there a lot of man-made obstacles? Were there dams? Did you have to get through a lot of like were there portages? Were there levees? Like, how did that work out for you in the beginning? And then eventually, were you free of those communities? Or was it mostly just pretty much steady the entire time? There was always some sort of obstacle.
I would say one of the biggest obstacles were just the higher grade class of rapids. So we would have to portage around anything higher than a class 2 rapid we portaged around. But then there were also a lot of dams that we had to portage around as well. Just every so often there would be one, and they were all very clearly marked on our map. So we knew when they were coming up. It wasn't a surprise usually.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of beta, right? It's a pretty well-traveled trail. So nothing was going to surprise you out there.
There's set maps, a 13 set of maps you can buy, and it has everything very clearly listed out in there. They revise them every couple of years, and it has all the portages marked, has all the dams marked, all the towns marked. There's a guidebook you can get. So it's very well established, surprisingly. I think it was completed in 2011 or 12 or so. So it's not that old, and we might have been in the first 100 people to through paddle. It's probably around 100 at this point. So surprisingly well documented for how few people. I guess a lot of people go out and probably just weekend do.
There's probably enough sections out there that when all the sections are joined together, there's a big long system, but people use a different section each time. But we all benefit from that. Did you see any of the through paddlers?
We did actually, but not until the end. So during the whole trail, there are these little canoe kiosks where you can sign your name in and the date and just write a little comment. And so there were a couple of people ahead of us. So every time we would hit another kiosk, we would see their names. And finally, one day we saw another canoe, and we saw two of the names that we've been seeing in these kiosks on the canoe. So we were like, oh, we caught up to one of the other through paddlers. So we kind of stuck around for a little bit, and we ended up meeting them. And they said that another two through paddlers were maybe just a day ahead of them. And so we were able to reach up to them as well. So, but up until maybe the last week or so, we didn't meet any other through paddlers.
So having gone 42 days and is not that you were shooting for it, nor should you, right? Enjoy the experience. Is there an FKT on there? Is there an end to end? Has someone done it with speed, or has that not been determined yet?
I don't know if it was in the guidebook, but I'm pretty sure I did read that it was 3 men said it. I don't remember which year. And it might've been like 23 days they did it in.
Okay.
And to get back to Kim's story, the couple that we were chasing, their names were Tim and Nora. And every time we'd see these kiosks, it would have their names listed and where they're from and like the color of their canoe and stuff. So we had a little bit of idea who they were. And we were like, oh, Tim and Nora are 4 days ahead of us. Oh, Tim and Nora are only 3 days ahead of us. And so we knew we were catching up to them. And then finally we got to this big, probably one of the cruxes of the trail. It's called the Mud Pond Carry, this very difficult historic carry. And they did it in two passes. So they left their boat, took their gear to the other end. And so we got there and we saw their boat and we were like, it's Tim and Nora. Took all these pictures with their boat and stuff. And then we're hiking down the trail and it's like knee deep muck you're walking through. And this couple comes back the other way and we're like, Tim? Nora? And they're like, yeah. We're like, it's Tim and Nora. Like, this big, and they have no idea who we are. Like, we've been following them, but they have no idea who we are behind them. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, we had this big celebration. Then we're like, oh yeah, we're just kind of stalking you. And
yeah, like, oh yeah, hi guys, we're in the middle of nowhere. Thanks for stopping in.
With them that night and exchanging all these stories, and then we caught up to the other. It was a father and son duo, Tom and Brian, and so all 6 of us actually made it into town, the final finishing town in Fort Kent, Maine, together, and we spent a day together in town there, and all got dinner and shared our stories. So even though we didn't see any through paddlers the whole time, to come together at the end and share that experience was really special ending.
Yeah.
And isn't that's part of the, and it's agnostic to the event, right? It could be adventure racing. It could be any bikepacking trips, through hikes. But when you come across people who have a shared sense of experience, a shared sense of suffering, and suffering's a relative word to use. Let's be honest, it isn't really suffering, but you know what I mean? A shared sense of exertion that when you get around the same table together, it's one of the best feelings in the world. And you were probably talking about, oh, we had this weather, you had that weather, this is what we did. And we create that kinship around, a shared experience. I think that's one of the reasons why we do all of this, right? Looking back on the experience now and being away from it for coming up on a year and reflecting upon it, what were the long-term benefits that you took away from it in terms of the way that you see the world, the way you see yourselves, maybe the way you guys see your relationship? Like what was the growth point there?
I would just say being able to overcome hard things. Because for me, I had never done anything like this before. So I just feared that I wasn't going to be able to finish it, or, I wasn't strong enough.
So when did you realize that when did that balance sheet go the other way? Like, so if you start in the beginning, I'm not going to make it, 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 I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it. Like, when was that transfer for you?
I think maybe when we started paddling on day 1.
So you knew, like when you got started going, just the beginning was the most important part for you.
Exactly. Once I started going, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to finish it. And just being able to look back now, it was very physically demanding. Just looking back and being like, wow, I did that. I can overcome hard things. I can set a goal. I can achieve those goals if I put my mind to it and do a little bit of preparation.
Yeah. And then in retrospect, isn't it? And I don't know if this is your experience. I've seen this with people we've interviewed, and even myself, I could agree with that. You begin to frame challenge in a different way, right? That when you do something that you thought you couldn't do previously, and I don't care what that something is. For somebody, it might be running a 5K. It might be running 100 miles in Key West. Who knows what it is? But once you do that thing, nothing is ever the same ever again.
Yeah, definitely.
Based on that, like, Well, and this is a question more for the end of the podcast than for the middle of the podcast, but what's next? Is there another thing that you're considering, Kim, doing that's another hard thing that you're looking at? And would you do something solo?
Another hard thing that we are about to do is a 10-day kayaking trip in Iceland. But it's not going to be as long as the Northern Forest Canoe Trail.
Well, be careful. It could be.
Yes. The difference is we were in a tandem canoe during the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. And this time we will be in solo boats. So for me, that is another challenge, just because if I felt like I was slacking a little bit, Joel was still paddling. So this time I'll have to be doing all of the paddling myself. So
is this another trip that you're doing your own navigation on, or just part of an organized experience?
This is with a gentleman I met from the Czech Republic who we were hiking the PCT together, and we just kind of shared a few days together and kept in touch. And he's lived and worked at this hotel in Iceland for 5 years or so, and had this idea to visit this fjord that is completely remote, isolated, no roads go out there. And he didn't want to do the trip alone just for safety reasons. Mm-hmm. We thought about doing it the year following our PCT hike, and it didn't work out. And then he kind of messaged me out of the blue and said, "Hey, are you interested in doing this?" And we were already going to go to Europe this summer to visit some other friends. So we were like, if we can get the timing right, we'll do them back to back. And so, yeah, we think it's going to work out. We're going to hit Iceland and do this paddling trip and then continue on to see our friends after that.
What kind of boats are you going to be in? Sea kayaks, pack rafts? What are you working on?
Yeah, I think plastic sea kayaks, just whatever the hotel has. The beauty of it is my friend works at this hotel, and it's like a fully self-sufficient hotel. They have their own greenhouse. They grow their own food. They have bikes and horses and kayaks and all these things. And it's nowhere near the capital. It's pretty far out there. So his deal was pretty much like, hey, if you can get here, I can pick you up. I can supply all the boats. I can supply the housing when we're not on the water. Just bring your own tent and stuff like that, and we'll buy whatever food and go. So it's a hard opportunity to pass up.
Yeah, this is a pretty good shot, Joe, that when you open up your luggage, I'm going to pop out of it. I mean, holy cow, what a great experience to be able to go to Iceland. And we all know, and you learned this on the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, and Joel, we're going to pivot to the PCT and the AT in a second with the gear, to have that kind of an opportunity to go there to do that and have your gear expectations be so low is just the greatest thing in the world. Because sometimes when you go to a big event, you feel like you're running away, right? You bring in boats and bikes and dry suits and all of that. And instead now it's just you and your gear, your clothing you need, obviously, and your own sleeping gear. But other than that, it sounds like it's a pretty self-sufficient experience for you. Yeah,
we should be pretty spoiled.
Now, Joel, circling back on you a little bit, having done the PCT, the AT, and the Mississippi Speed Record, talk a bit about your motivation for these things, right? To do those events requires a certain level of commitment that is beyond, somebody who has a commitment to, living in a certain area or doing a certain thing. Where does your motivation come from to do these things?
I think I just grew up outdoors and like doing those things, and always like to push myself, play a lot of sports, and enjoyed the physicality of it and being out in nature and the scenery. And so, you start small, just like anything. You go out for a backpacking trip or whatever. And then, so for me, my first big foray into this was the Appalachian Trail. And I was visiting a friend in Massachusetts, and we drove up Mount Greylock, which is the highest point in Massachusetts, and it's also on the AT. And while we were up there, these morons were hiking these super heavy packs up the hill in the middle of summer. I said, "What are these guys doing?" And she said, "Oh, this is the Appalachian Trail." And so that was what planted the seed for me. And then I finally was getting antsy at a job and had some money saved up, and I was maybe 25 at the time and decided to go for it and planned it all out, got the gear, had some of the gear, and stepped in and did it. And it was very difficult. It was 5.5 months, and I loved every second of it. It was very challenging. So then, having completed that, you just kind of gain the confidence and the preparation and the how-to of what's the next step. And for me, that led into 2 years in Cambodia serving in the Peace Corps. And then when I came back, I attempted to ride my bike cross country, got a little fed up along the way, and did a big cross country road trip instead. And then I did the PCT and then the Mississippi speed record. So these things kind of get progressively more and more remote and more out there and more challenging or faster or whatever it might be. And adventure racing's been there all along. So I think that has really fed into my confidence and my equipment and my skill level and my just kind of competence in the woods and on different means of travel.
And then Kim comes along, and all of a sudden Kim gets pulled into this, and next thing you know, she's 42 days paddling up the great Northern Forest Canoe Trail. Coming back to the canoe, what was the low point? When did it get really hard on the canoe trail?
The bugs were horrendous. I mean, it was maddening. We didn't, or at least I didn't expect that there were going to be that many bugs, and they were just attacking you all day, every day, all day.
Right. Well, did you try the bug shirt? Did you try this? Did you cover yourself in the spray they have? Were they just relentless that there was no stopping them? Because that's actually the biggest criticism of that area. Like the Adirondacks right now, the kayaking is open up there, and the kayaking forums are talking about the greenheads. And the greenheads are the flies with the green heads that bite, right? So was there any way you could hold off on them, or they were just, no matter what, they were going to get you? There was no strategy?
We didn't bring bug spray at first. So the first town that we came across after we started, we stopped and got bug spray. Yeah. But we also had bug net hats. And while we were at our campsite setting up for the evening and eating dinner, we would put on our rain gear. We would put on our rain pants and put on our rain jacket and, just have a barrier. Right. Yes, because it was the only way. And then we would try to just eat dinner as fast as we possibly could and just get into the tent.
I purchased the original bug shirt from the Scotland. We had the midges. And I'll tell you right now that I would have paid $1,000 for that shirt. It was the greatest piece of equipment that I had, because the midges would just descend upon you and they were terrible. You'd fight to get into this bug shirt, and it covered every part of your body. From the waist up, it covered you. And you were fine. And our poor colleagues would just be running around with masks. And Pete Spagnoli, Joe knows Pete. Pete forgot his bug net at one point. It was just bedlam. So the bugs were the lowest point, were the biggest challenge for you. Probably that first town you went across, the bug spray probably cost $50 a canister, because of course it was like suckers. Like, they had you. They knew you had to buy one. Joel, what was your low point?
I think maybe about halfway through, we just kind of the halfway point for me in any adventure is always a difficult point. You look forward to achieving that point for so long, and you finally do achieve it, and then you kind of turn around and say, wow, I'm only halfway. And for most things, I'd say you kind of ride the high for a while, and then that third quarter, so to speak, is kind of the trough. And I think that was no different here. And in this case, it was probably only a week or two of that low point, and we maybe have been getting on each other's nerves a little bit at some point.
Well, so, I mean, but that's a legit dynamic, because you're a team of two.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there's team dynamics in adventure racing. We all know play so much like teams of 2, 3, and 4. There's a different relationship that goes on there. And a team of 2, you had no one to complain to about the other person, which sometimes is a legitimate thing to sort of, it's kind of cathartic. You didn't have that ability. You guys had to live with each other.
And we couldn't separate from each other. We were on the canoe all day together.
Right.
Which 99% of the time was great and fine and lovely. It was very little tension there, but every now and then there was just like, all those pressures are building up between the bugs and the heat and the portages and stuff. So it doesn't take much to push over the edge, and
it kind of pops a little bit, right? And you got to get it out, and then you apologize to each other, and the world moves on.
Thus, we were just kind of dealing with those feelings ourselves in our own head. It didn't really go into a verbal exchange often, but just stuff you got to deal with.
So I've been doing some interviews lately, and one thing I've picked up on with a lot of the adventure racing I'm hearing is that a lot of successful teams are having conversations before the race about the in-race expectations, right? So rather than wait to be on stage 2 and on a mountain bike, if someone says, well, I really wanted to go fast and I really just wanted to go slow, they're having these conversations in advance of the experience, which is clearly setting up for success. Aside from your physical preparation and training, how many conversations did you have before the experience about what you wanted to add to the experience?
I'm not sure. We definitely talked about it a lot. There was a lot, especially this being Kim's first adventure to the scale, that I think there was a lot of just talk every day. It wasn't like we'd spend 8 hours on it, but an hour here, an hour there, every single day, every single week, and we'd make lists, gear lists, food lists, clothing lists, all these different things. So, yeah, I'm sure we talked about our expectations and how hard it would be, and things that we would probably struggle with. And inevitably you get out there and the plan never survives contact with the enemy, and
always
kind of make it up as you go. But I think we went into it with a decent mindset and preparation. And I've always believed, like you said before, with preparation, I've always believed that so much of the battle is won before you even step to the finish line. And going back to adventure racing, I'm packing up for the Shenandoah Epic right now, and all week I've had my gear laid out, and you nitpick through everything, and you fine tune it all, and your training takes over weeks and months. And so the race is just the tip of the iceberg. The 90% of the preparation all happened before you even step to that line, and just showing up happy and healthy and ready to go is just a very small bit of that race.
That gets paraphrased with an Ironman triathlon. They say that the Ironman itself is actually a victory lap. That all the work has been done, the hay's in the barn, and your job is to go out there and kind of enjoy it. Did it go haywire out there at all? Was there an equipment issue? Was there a piece of gear that was missing? Did something break that shouldn't have broken? Did you run out of fuel? Like, was there any requirement for you to improvise and figure out something on your feet, or was it steady along the way?
It was mostly steady along the way. Although we had one portage where, what are they called on the portage wheels?
Knob.
Yeah, there's like a little knob on the portage wheel that we tighten on and take off every time we're using them or not using them. And we lost it. I don't know if it just came loose or we didn't put it on, or so what happens is the portage wheels, they kind of fold in on themselves. So we had to pick up another one of those knobs, which we were lucky enough to find at one of the outdoor stores called Ecopelagicon. They just had like extra parts like that. So
that's a pretty vital piece of equipment, because those portage wheels go down.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a 20-mile road walk. It's going to be an ugly day.
Yeah, luckily the way we strapped it, the strap supported the wheel, so it wasn't the end of the world, but it was nice peace of mind to get that back.
Gotcha. If looking back on the experience, is there something that you would have done differently in retrospect? Would you have packed a different type of food, different type of gear, something else that you would have figured out? This would have been much better if we'd done it this way.
I think there was one more.
I forgot.
One more. I'm sorry.
Malfunction.
One more malfunction. Okay, good.
Ones.
Well, you were so smooth at answering that first question. I thought there were another malfunction, so I apologize. What was the other malfunction?
Another malfunction, which I totally just forgot about until just now. Our tent broke. That was pretty major. So it was raining and our tent was leaking, and so I had the idea, we'll just have to sort of fix it tomorrow. Why don't we just put our rain jacket on top of the tent so we don't get rained on? And so during the evening, all of the water piled into the rain jacket and just cracked one of our tent poles.
It already had a small crack in it, so it wasn't a new failure, but it stressed that fracture.
So you were in a leaky, collapsed tent in the rain.
Yeah, I woke up in the rain and the ceiling was touching our head.
Yeah.
And said, "This isn't right." We stayed dry.
Yeah.
All right. So you had those two malfunctions. Okay. So was there a third malfunction?
My phone broke, but I was able to order a new one and send it to a post office, which is what we did with our tent too. We were able to order a tent and we just sent it to a post office, far enough ahead that we knew that we would intersect with, and were able to pick it up.
Yeah.
How great is that?
With that, the tent was the next morning when we woke up and the tent was touching our head. That was the coldest and wettest day on the trail. I mean, every day was surprisingly cold. It would drop into the 40s and 50s at night and 70s during the day. Beautiful paddling weather up there that time of year. So that morning was just really windy and really cold, and we were in every piece of clothing we had, and we were still freezing, and we're just like, okay, let's find somewhere where we can get this tent dry and try and field repair it so we have something to sleep in, because it was going to take us a week until we got that new tent. Great, we ordered it, but we needed to survive for another week still until we could pick that up. And so we pulled off at this bridge, and there was just like one house in the middle of nowhere, and this guy had a little farm stand. And so we walk up to the farm stand, and it was like a pay your money and take your produce. Like there's nobody there. It's just like a treat yourself kind of thing. So we like huddle into the farm stand, and we're all shaking, and I get out the duct tape and a knife, and I'm cutting the cords and trying to string together, trying to MacGyver this thing. And the guy pulls up, and turns out he was actually associated with the trail. He kind of maintained that section of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, and also kind of started a nature education center in that area. So was pretty familiar. What we were doing was pretty kind to our problems. And he got on the phone with a friend and was like, hey, I got this couple here. Their tent broke. Can they borrow one of your tents? And the guy was like, yeah. And he goes, okay. He hangs up and said, I'm going to go get that tent for you guys. I'll be back in an hour. And so he went to his friend's house, got the tent, came back, gave it to us, wrote down the guy's address, and said, when you're done with it, just mail it back to this address.
How great is that?
This 7 miles down the trail, we get a new tent. We kept the other one just in case, but we had this brand new tent that worked fine and saved us for a week. We got to the post office and got our new tent and mailed the other one back. And
how great is that? And he just gave it to you.
Yeah. So
he didn't make you leave money. He didn't, all of that. He just simply gave you the tent and said, good luck, and send it back when you're done. That's great.
Never saw him again. Never heard from him again. It was that easy.
Yeah, it was incredible just how many people were so kind to us. I think that, people just saw what we were doing and were interested in what we were doing, and always offered water or if we needed anything. So that was just it was like an eye-opening experience, because people think like, oh, you're going to meet so many scary people out there. But in reality, like, everybody was just interested in what we were doing and asking if they could help us in any way. And everyone was just very kind.
Exactly. I've done some big bike packing trips, an exact same experience. There's something that when well-meaning people show up with gear, whether it be a canoe, whether it be a bike loaded with a tent and bags, when they show up somewhere, people are fascinated by people that are on a journey. Tell where you're going, what are you doing, who are you? I mean, I was in York, Pennsylvania. I stopped at a donut shop, because you have to get a donut when you're on a bike packing trip. And like this World War II veteran was there, and he was the nicest guy in the world, and he couldn't get enough of me. And he actually waited up the road for me and gave me proper directions to the next place, right? People are they get absorbed into your adventure, and they want to hear about it. And sometimes they want to go with you. Sebastian Junger wrote a great book called Freedom. Really, really good read. And Sebastian Junger, what an amazing writer, perfect storm. And basically him and a crew of friends, they walked the rail lines in the Northeast across Pennsylvania. And they literally would come across people who would ask them what they were doing, and were like, can I come with you? Like, I can get my stuff and I can come with you. There's something about the idea of people on a journey that just excites something inside of people that's almost primal. They love it. And that experience that you had, everybody you came across was just totally into it. That's great. That's heartwarming, right? The idea you had that experience. Nobody was brandishing a shotgun at you, and get off my property, or if they did, you're keeping that to yourself. That's good. So getting back to the question, when I interrupted your answer before, in retrospect, is there something that you wish you had done differently when it came to your preparation and packing that you learned on the trail? You would have enjoyed having more of this.
At this point, I don't think so. I'm sure we talked about it immediately after, and I can't really recall anything. In hindsight, the wheels that we had, luckily, having done the Mississippi speed record where we did some big rugged portages, we used the same set of wheels, and they're an expensive set of portage wheels, but they were bomb-proof. They held up through everything, and it was some really rugged trails that were hauling 170 pounds of gear over, just smashing that thing, and it held up to everything. And a couple other people we ran into had smaller, dinkier ones that would get stuck, would break, and things like that. So that was probably the MVP of the trail. That and our big portage packs were pretty pivotal to our portages.
Yeah, and there's a lesson there when it comes to buying gear. Buy once, cry once. right? Get something good. Don't get something that's going to fall apart on you. It's going to break. It's not worth your while to go cheap with certain items, right? To figure those things out. You've referenced the Mississippi Speed Record a few times, Joel, and I had the opportunity to watch that live and how that went down. Can you tell the audience a bit about that adventure? Because that was quite the adventure.
Yeah, me and 3 other guys tried to break the Guinness World Record for paddling the length of the Mississippi River, and the record at the time was just over 18 days, and we got 17 days in, and then got caught in the edge of a tropical storm, hit some big waves and some big wind, and we sunk our boat at midnight on the 17th day. And so it was a wild ride. They're actually gearing up to attempt it in less than a month. They're going to go early May again this year with a new team. So good luck to them. And
I can tell you, as someone who was a super fan of that experience, it had the event. You were a tracker, right? It had the adventure racing vibe, and there was a thread of about 18 people that all we did for those 18 days, 17.5 days, we traded screenshots of where you were, your route, Google Maps, Caltopo, how they get around this. And it was an enthralling experience. There was actually talk of making a mission out there and standing on a bridge, driving like 18 hours to wave at you to get back in the car and drive home. But we came to our senses and that never happened. But the entire world was rooting you guys off the distance. And I remember when that sunk and the storm was coming in, they were talking about it and the online tracking was so, and then we obviously, when we knew you were safe, we were relieved. But in the beginning, we were gutted for all you guys. It was an amazing, amazing adventure. How did you kind of process out it afterwards, after all that preparation to have it finish up like that? Because that's a pretty big thing to sort of wrap your head around.
Yeah, it was unfortunate the way it ended. I at least think that we gave it our all. We had a great plan. We were ahead of the record at the time we sunk. So I think we were all feeling good about that. It was kind of out of our control. We knew, even though there was a dozen factors in the whole course of the attempt that we could control, that there was probably another 3 or 4: weather, locks, water level, all those things were kind of out of our control. It just kind of depends year to year. And we had a great run those 17 days. We really had the best weather we could have hoped for. Going down, we had good water levels, especially the Ohio River when that came in, gave us a good push. And so we were doing great. We just got unlucky with the weather there. And, had we that same thing happened on day 3, I think we all would have been left with some longing. But the fact that it happened so close to the end, it was kind of a blessing and a curse. I think we could all keep our heads high and know we gave it our best effort, and we were proud of it. But at the same time, to be so close and to have it taken away when it was all but riding the current at that point.
Yeah. It's a hard thing, in our conversations about it, as we talked about it, at least, as unfortunate as it was, and we were all rooting for you guys to finish that, at least it wasn't like you missed the record by like an hour and a half, right? The fact that the weather took you out of it, the fact that it was beyond your control is somewhat of a sense of comfort. Looking back on it, right? You'd still would love to have broken the record and been part of it, but being where you were, and I mean, just a plain old fashioned, heroic, inspirational trip that we were all following along and all rooting. And I think that's a big part of what we do, right? Like the reason why you're on the podcast today is that I want people to hear about your adventure, and it's an act of bravery, right? You change your life and you change your job and you do the planning and the preparation. And for 42 days, you throw yourself into it. And Kim, and not to overuse the word, but like, you're a real hero here. The fact that you've never done this before, and the fact you said you could do this, and now you could do hard things, right? And now you're going off to Iceland and you're going to have this great experience there. As the two of you look further down the road a little bit and you look at this summer and you look at Europe, is there anything big like this that's on your radar that you're considering for the road? Like, are you considering going back to Cambodia, doing some rivers there, something in South America? Is there a trekking expedition? Where are you going to take this newfound skill set? Where are you going to apply it?
I don't know. There's always ideas in the works. I have a little book that I kind of keep my secrets in and write some of this stuff down and break it out at opportune times. But it's funny that the night we finished, got a hotel room and we finally got a shower and stuff. And we're laying there and like soaking in the revelry of having completed this trail. And Kim pulls up her phone and all of a sudden we find ourselves looking up hikes in like Scotland and other adventures that we could go on and stuff. So, it was a matter of hours until we were already looking forward to that next thing. And So we don't really have any concrete ideas for me personally. I've done 2 of the big 3, the Triple Crown, they say, of through hiking in the U.S. So there's a 3rd leg out there that will probably pull at me one day, the Central Divide Trail. And Kim actually brought up the idea of through paddling the Danube River in Europe one day out of the blue. And that's, many weeks and hundreds of miles through paddle. So
I look forward to the day, Joel, when you're sitting home and a package arrives from Amazon and Kim gives you a copy of the Danube River. Oh, by the way, I got this for you, dear. Oh, by the way, here's this. Next thing you know, she's looking at plane tickets, and you're the passenger this time, and you're being pulled along.
Looked it up. She found the website with all these mile markers and stuff, and people do it. There's data out there on it. So, it took our relationship to the next level.
Great experience. Great stuff. So, Kim, we're gonna wrap it up now. I want to give you a chance to close it out, because the Dark Zone is all about the idea of highlighting people who do things they didn't think they could do previously, right? And we want to give them a voice. We want to share with other people. One of our most common pieces of listener feedback that we get is that people enjoy hearing stories about people who go from point A to point B and their journey along the way. And you've clearly done that, right? You've gone from point A to point B. What do you want to say to the person right now who's sitting at home listening to this and they're now toying with the idea of something big? What do you want them to know?
I guess I would just want them to know, that at least for me, the anxiety of actually doing it and actually leaving my job was bigger than it actually was. There is life on the other end of the adventure. Because for me, it was really hard to be like, am I going to leave my job? Am I going to be able to find something? That was like the biggest stressor for me. But there are so many jobs out there and there's so many things out there that I think it's easier to step back into regular life than at least I made it out to be in my head. So I would say, go for it, take the leap, and you only live once. And I always say that, we're here on this earth, and if you want to go and experience something, you only have one life to do it. So I would say, go for it.
Well, there you go, folks. Another episode of The Dark Zone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for giving Joel and Kim your time. That was a fun recording and a really good conversation with them. And they're just 2 wonderful people doing gutsy things together. Really nice example for the rest of us. And I was delighted to bring their story to the world. So thanks to them, and thanks to them and all their adventures and what they're going to do from here on in. And thank you for being here. Obviously, The Dark Zone is driven by listener interest and listener content. So we really appreciate your input. So thank you for that. Do us a favor and head over to your streaming platform of choice and click like and subscribe. The algorithm likes when that happens. It bumps us up the ratings and the scales a little bit, and that always helps us. No need to do it if you can't, but it does help, and we are glad that you are here no matter what. Keep in mind, folks, as always, that if you keep racing, we'll keep training. Have a wonderful 2025. We'll be here, and we hope you are too.